In a city like Baltimore, many children are met with crime right outside their front door. Poverty is what they know, and when it's been that way for generations, it can be difficult to see a future.
But as Project Baltimore's Chris Papps explains, where you begin isn't always where you end up.
Growing up surrounded by violence, Dr. Ben Carson thought that he would be dead by the time he was 20. Instead, he became a world-renowned pediatric brain surgeon at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And now he's trying to prove that his success was not a fluke. Project Baltimore sat down with Dr. Ben Carson at his home in Northern Virginia, a home very different from the one he grew up in.
And I remember very vividly thinking that I would probably never live to be more than 20 years old, 25 at the most, because that's what I saw around me.
Carson's life began in poverty 70 years ago, surrounded by crime and violence in Detroit and later Boston.
Both of my older cousins were killed. It was an awful environment.
An environment his mother refused to allow him to accept.
She just would not allow us to be victims.
Carson's mother was not highly educated. She cleaned houses to support the family. But Carson says she taught him to love reading. And in books, he found an escape.
And I hated poverty. After I began to recognize that I could control my own economic circumstances by my achievement, I didn't mind being poor anymore, because I knew it was only temporary.
And he was right. Carson would go on to graduate from Yale University and become a world-renowned pediatric brain surgeon at Johns Hopkins. After a nearly 30-year medical career, he retired in 2013. 3 years later, he ran for president and later served 4 years as the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He's written best-selling books. In 2008, Carson received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. As you reflect on your life, your experiences, your successes, your failures, how do you frame that in your mind?
Well, I ask myself, how did all that happen? Was it a fluke, or is it something that can be disseminated and make a useful situation for thousands, if not millions, of young people?
In some ways, Carson's childhood was a valuable lesson. It taught him insight into what life is like for many young people in Baltimore, a city that's recorded more than 300 murders per year for 7 straight years.
It makes you frightened and always weary, where you go looking around, trying to figure out if something bad's going to happen to you.
Poverty and violence can be detrimental to a young life. Trauma can impact a child's ability to learn. Recent state test scores show 83% of students tested in Baltimore City public schools are not proficient in English language arts. Without the ability to read, Carson believes his success would not have been possible.
When you see people who are highly successful, in most cases, they have a family or they have someone outside of the family who took a special interest in them.
Carson began doing for others what his mother did for him: offer the gift of reading. In 2000, Carson began opening reading rooms at schools and community centers around Baltimore, then the entire country, focusing on neighborhoods with high levels of poverty, where children have little, if any, access to books. The 250th Carson Reading Room just opened in Texas. Meanwhile, the Carson Scholars Program has awarded more than $6 million in college scholarships. And Carson's latest initiative, American Cornerstone, is a nonprofit focused on improving education for all Americans.
I have put so much emphasis on it for other young people because I know that's what changes the trajectory of a person's life.
Carson believes that because he says it happened to him. From where his life began, to where he sits now.
And if you give a person in this country a good education, it doesn't matter where they came from. They can come from the ghetto. They can come from Appalachia. It doesn't matter where they come from. They can write their own ticket.
But in Baltimore City, are children getting the education they need? Recently, Project Baltimore has made some stunning findings, to millions of dollars being sent to schools to educate students who aren't there, to high schools where most of the kids are reading at an elementary school level. We asked Dr. Carson about these investigations. Coming up Wednesday night on Fox 45 News at 10, we'll tell you what he says are the biggest obstacles facing city schools and how to solve it. Again, Wednesday night at 10. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Dr. Carson is using his own life experience to provide opportunities for other children who are growing up in crime and poverty.
And we want to hear from you. What factor do you believe plays the biggest role in determining success? Early education, parental guidance, or the environment that they are living in? Go to foxbaltimore.com/vote. Click on the Pulse tab to weigh in.